In this movie, we take a look at the type selector as well as descendant and multiple selectors. The type selector is perhaps the easiest and most commonly used selector available to us. In fact, we've already been using the type selector for a while now in a lot of our different demonstrations. So here I have already opened up the sandbox for this movie, and it's in the 04 folder of our exercise files for Sandbox. So as you can see here, we do have an HTML document that does have a number of elements inside of it. And let's go ahead and take a look at the code behind here, the sandbox. We'll see that we already have a style section set up for us to use. And then we have an H1 tag followed by a paragraph tag, an unordered list, and inside of that it's got some strong emphasis tags. Then we end up having an H2 tag with an A, which is our anchor with a name. Same thing down below here. Then we have some other A tags with hrefs. So those are going to be our links. So we have links and anchors, strong tags, emphasis tags. We have a lot of stuff in here that we're going to be working with throughout this section. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to take a look at our type selector. So our type selector is actually really easy here. I'll just go ahead and click in my style section and create my type selector. So what I want to do is I want to target the Welcome to the Sandbox. Welcome to the Sandbox is inside of an H1 tag. So I just need to say H1 and then put in my scroll braces. And I want to set the color of it to blue and put in that semicolon. Now, that's pretty much all there is to creating your type selectors. I do want to point out that to target the H1 tag, I just leave off the angle brackets that are associated with that specific tag. So I'll go ahead and save that and jump back into Firefox and refresh, and my Welcome to the Sandbox turns blue. Now, our type selectors are going to be used to designate when we want to target all the HTML objects of a particular kind, such as what we have done here, as well as what we did in a previous movie with the body tag and the p tag. However, the type selector can be pretty limiting when you want to focus in on specific objects. And of course, that's why we have some of the other selectors that we have available to us, so that we can do those particular types of selecting. Now essentially that's the basics of using your type selector. I do want to jump back into the code for a moment here to talk a little bit about my styling. Now what I'm referring to by style is how I'm writing my CSS rules. Now here I have it all in one line, and depending on how you like to write your code, you may like this or you may not. In fact, you may want to indent so it's easier to read, and then separate at the scroll braces. So if you find that to be a little bit easier to read, feel free to use that or whatever method you want to write this in. More or less, CSS is going to get rid of white space that it doesn't need. However, there are some things that it will detect the white space and use that, and we'll be pointing that out throughout the course. I'll go ahead and put in a space between my property and my value, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. I'll go ahead and save that, and if I jump back into Firefox and refresh, I'll see that there's absolutely no change, which just indicates the fact that white space is optional. Now there are two other things that I want to talk about in this movie. These two other things are not specific to type selectors, but can be applied to all the other selector types as well. Those two things are descendants and multiple selectors. When we use descendants in our selectors, we can select specific HTML elements based on whether or not a DOM structure is present. So if we want to select all of the strong tags inside of a paragraph tag, but not inside of a list, we can write the following rule. We can say we want to select all the p tags, and inside of that p tag, just the strong tags. Now with this rule, we're saying we want to select all strong tags inside of a paragraph tag. So we're not saying that we want to select the paragraph tag and the strong tag. We're saying just the strong tags that are inside of the paragraphs. So when you're using descendants inside of your selectors, the last stated descendant is the actual object that you will be selecting. So in this case, we want our strong tags to show up as being red. So I'll go ahead and save that and jump back into Firefox and refresh, and here we have it. So you see we have the strong tag showing up here as red, but if you notice, the strong tags in the lists are not selected. And of course that's because we have specified a descendant. Pretty interesting stuff and very powerful. So let's take a look at multiple selectors. Now back in our document we have our H1 tag. And our H1 tag is set to control the color of all heading 1s. However, we also want to go ahead and specify it so that it makes all paragraphs blue as well. Now what we could do is we could just rewrite the rule so that it says P color blue, but that would actually take up a bit more time. Now what we can do is we can combine our selectors together so that we can have multiple elements being affected with the same rule. And that's pretty powerful. The way that we specify this is by adding in a comma. So I add in a comma and then I'll put in a P. So here I'm saying all H1 tags and all paragraph tags will be blue. So I'll go ahead and save that and refresh. And there we go. All of the paragraph tags and all the content in that have now turned blue. I do want to take a moment to look at the sandbox file again to point out that we did use commas in the multiple selectors. So it is a comma separated list, and we used a space between our parent and descendant. So if you're going to be navigating the DOM and using descendant selectors, make sure you put that in a space delimited list. And if you're going to be using multiple selectors, make sure you're using a comma separated list. Now that concludes this look at type selectors, descendants, and multiple selectors.